Senate voiced the suspicion that the island may have been destroyed by the in order to ensure U.S. control over the offshore oil and gas fields in the Gulf. And then bribed, and then one of the senators who demanded this further investigation is driven off the road and killed by a assailant who's never caught.
There must have been a moment, I don't know, where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to compose basically a symphony of music around each one of these places. Each Phantom Island, you have a song based on each island, and I'm just super curious, where did that come from?
I've always been interested in and kind of a fan of this kind of musical genre from the 1950s called exotica. Which was kind of a strange and, from a modern perspective, you could say problematic genre of music where essentially American easy listening and so light jazz and pop was kind of ornamented with instruments and other signifiers from the South Pacific, Africa, from Latin America, but actually had very little to do musically with those places. As politically incorrect and tasteless, let's say, as this is from a modern perspective, nonetheless, it is very evocative music. Something like a modern translation of that was what I was interested in doing, and these Phantom Islands were the perfect foil for that because these are places that don't exist. Therefore, there is no native music, there are no indigenous people to capture their music, their culture, their instruments, and utilize for whatever purposes.
You were born in Uzbekistan in 1973, and at that time when you were born in Uzbekistan, that region was part of the Soviet Union, right?
That's right.
And the USSR was on a map. It was a major part of a map, right? And Uzbekistan was just a region inside of it, but it wasn't a country, it wasn't on the map. Now, the USSR doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
And it's not on any maps anymore. Maybe maps aren't really ever real. Not as real as we think they are, you know?
Well, I mean, maps, they're always constituting reality, right? They're a tool and they have a certain authority that is granted to them by all of us, but they're part of the whole machinery of political authority. You know, maps have this aura of being neutral, of showing the world, quote unquote, as it really is, but of course they're always made from and by individuals or institutions with a certain perspective.
For you, what does it mean in this day and age to get lost?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Thanks.
I mean, it's, as probably everybody who thinks about this question will tell you, it's nigh on impossible to get lost physically these days, right? You're always with a map, and the map is always very accurate. It's on your phone and stuff. You have to really go out of your way to get lost. For me, getting lost it comes back to music. That's the place when I'm making music or performing music by myself or with others, or even listening to music. There's a state that you sometimes enter where you don't know where you are on the map, where there's no map. When the map falls away, the territory falls away, you're kind of in a free fall. But it's a positive thing. It's a good feeling.
A good loss.
Yeah.
Uzbekistani electronic musician Andrew Peckler on his work A Sonic Atlas. Charles Monroe Kane spoke with him. If you want to explore Andrew's Sonic Atlas, we've got it on our website at ttbook.org. To the best of our knowledge is produced at Wisconsin Public Radio and distributed by PRX. Charles Monroe Kane produced today's episode. He had help from Shannon Henry Cliver, Angela Bautista, and Mark Rickers. Our technical director and sound designer is Joe Hartke, with help from Sarah Hopeful. Additional music this week comes from Nicola Bolari, Jacob Silver, Tavaka, Skema Wold, Simon Gardam, and Johnny Ripper. The executive producer, to the best of our knowledge, is Steve Paulson, and I'm Anne Strangehands. Be well, and come back often.
WPR is proud to be Islam Media and Paula Poundstone appearing at Viterbo's Weber Center series on Friday, September 13th at 7:30. You probably know Paula from her many appearances on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. If you're headed to the show, make sure you look for the WPR table and say hello to our WPR community ambassadors. If you think you might like to be a WPR community ambassador, send us an email, southwest@wpr.org.
90.3 WHLA La Crosse. This is WPR News.
What was a trigger for so many of our staff is when people came up and said, I know what you're feeling. They're saying, oh, really?
How do you begin to move forward after a school shooting? We'll talk to a school principal who knows all too well what it's like. For Saturday, September 7th, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow. Ahead, we'll check in with Pennsylvania voters ahead of next week's big debate in Philadelphia, and we'll look at why so many corporations are stepping back from DEI efforts.
I think what that does is kind of sends a message to people from underrepresented backgrounds in the workplace that maybe, they don't belong there.
Also, what's going on with the surprisingly quiet hurricane season?
Don't let your guard down now. There are many years where we've had 7 hurricanes after September 5th.
And a review of the new Beetlejuice sequel, all that and more after this newscast. Stick with us.
Live from
Won't have answered until after the election whether Trump will serve time behind bars, after a New York judge Friday agreed to delay sentencing for his felony hush money conviction. Amy Hells, NPR News. At a Financial Times conference in London, the head of the CIA says the U.S. is making a new ceasefire proposal for the war in Gaza. NPR's Lauren Frayer has that story.
CIA Director Bill Burns says this new, more detailed ceasefire proposal is still being worked out by the U.S. and other mediators, but that they expect to present it to Israel and Hamas soon. In an unprecedented joint appearance in London with his British counterpart, Burns said 90% of the proposal.
Welcome to the most exciting live stream on YouTube.
The last 10% is the last 10% for a reason.
It's just me sitting in a car.
And MI6 Chief Richard Moore said a
giving thumbs
would
up.
allow officials to focus then on regional risks. Lauren Frayer and
So awesome.
A 14-year-old is facing 4 counts of murder in the deaths of 2 teachers and 2 high school students at a shooting outside of Atlanta on Wednesday. And NPR's Meg Anderson reports Georgia officials are prosecuting the teen as an adult.
All 50 states allow children to be prosecuted as adults. How that's decided varies by state, but often it depends on the crime. In Georgia, for instance, any child 13 or older charged with murder automatically ends up in adult court. Marshall Levin, Chief Legal Officer of the Juvenile Law Center, says children should not be prosecuted as adults
They
from the crime
also
that's
shouldn't
horrible.
do that.
The fact that a child commits a murder
It is
does
unfortunate.
not erase the developmental
But let's not be
maturity that
wishful
possess.
thinkers here.
Criminal justice experts say nearly all juveniles who commit school shootings across the country end up being tried as adults. Meg Anderson, NPR News.
It's the way it is.
Excessive heat warnings continue in California.
Just don't do that.
This is NPR.
How about that?
The Eric Kroll Museum of Picture Book Art has acquired work by the late illustrator Jerry Pinkney, specifically artwork from his 2009 book The Lion and the Mouse, which earned Pinkney a Caldecott Medal, the highest honor in picture book art. NPR's Andrew Limbon has more.
You've probably heard the story before. A lion spares a mouse's life. The mouse then saves the lion from hunters. It's an old fable, but Jerry Pinkney made it new. In his version of the story, there are barely any words. All of the story is told through Pinkney's expressive and distinctive watercolor style.
And that's something that Jerry Pinkney is a master at.
Isabel Ruiz-Gano, curator at the Eric Kroll Museum.
Creating these animals with just such incredible personalities to them.
Pinkney died in 2021. His work will be on display at the museum until early next year, but it will also be archived and preserved, so Pinkney can be remembered forever. Andrew Limbon, NPR News.
Protest erupted across France today. President Emmanuel Macron named conservative politician Michel Barnier as the new prime minister. Barnier, who is 73, is the European Union's former Brexit negotiator, replacing France's first openly gay prime minister and the youngest, Gabriel Attal. Barnier, speaking to reporters, said discussions to form a new government, including with the left, are going well. The nationwide protests were organized by France's New Popular Front, or NFP, and trade unions. I'm Dwali Saikeltel, NPR News from New York City.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the NPR Wine Club, bringing people wines inspired by NPR shows. Whether purchasing a few bottles or joining the club, every purchase supports NPR. Available to adults 21 or older. NPRWineClub.org.
With so much going on, it can be hard to keep up with who's doing what and why. I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, letting you know whether it's news from across the country and the world, or a deep conversation about a novel, movie, or music. We got you. Grab your coffee or your earbuds and tune in to Weekend Edition on NPR News.
Sunday morning at 7 on Wisconsin Public Radio.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Tetro. The faculty of Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, joined a group this week that no one wants to see. An ever-growing group of school principals, teachers, and administrators who have experienced a mass shooting. There is a network in place to help them out, a network that sadly has a lot of experience talking to people who have been in the exact same position. The Principal Recovery Network was founded in 2019 by Frank DeAngelis and others. DeAngelis was principal of Columbine High School in 1999 when two students opened fire and killed more than a dozen people. He joins us now, Frank DeAngelis. Welcome to All Things Considered.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we talked to you a few years ago after the Uvalde shooting, and you said that every time you see the headline, you get the text alert about another school shooting, it just brings it all back. I imagine it happened again this week for you.
Yes, it was really strange because it's been a tough year for me. I've had some health issues, and I usually talk to my counselor, and I've been in counseling since the Columbine tragedy happened, and I had not talked to him in a while, so I had set up an appointment, and I was actually in his office, and he helped me greatly. And as I come down the stairs to leave his office, my phones just started basically exploding with text messages. Are you aware what's happening? Are you aware? And phone calls, media calls, and I knew that there was another school shooting. And it does. It takes you back. And for us, it's been over 25 years, but there's certain things that trigger, these emotions when these events happen, and it does.
Yeah. You know, we see it in so many different ways, the way that after a shooting, the media conversation, the political conversation can go several different directions. And I'm wondering for you personally, What are the things that you are thinking about in the days, in the weeks like we've yet again just had?
I am not looking at the political things because I just had this conversation with someone. The kids that lost their lives, the teachers, they're not going to have Republican or Democrat on their caskets. You know, I look at it from the standpoint that they're all of our kids. And right away, I start thinking about the recovery piece, next steps, because I can remember when Columbine happened on April 20th of '99. It was a couple of days afterwards, and I received a phone call from a gentleman named Bill Bond, and he was the principal at Heath High School in Paducah, Kentucky, when his event happened in 1997. And he made a comment to me that still resonates today. He told me who he was, and he said, "You don't even know what you need, but here's my number." And he was exactly right. And I called him, and I can remember after receiving that call, I said, "I just hope that I never have to make the call that Bill did." Well, unfortunately, since Columbine, I've made it numerous times.
So you've, like you said, been through these phases so many times, and to the point where the Principal Recovery Network has put together a guide for principals of what to do next if your school has had a shooting like this. Can you tell us what the first wave of top priorities are for administrators at Appalachia High School right now?
My first thing when I make a phone call, as I've done over the years, the first thing I ask is, what do you do to take care of yourself? Because right now, the principal and the others that are there just feel the need to take care of everyone else. And then the second piece is stating you're not in this journey alone. The most difficult challenge is keeping everyone together. We can all experience the same event, but how we deal with it, we deal with it differently. And I think that was one of my most difficult things. And I used to share, you know, when a family goes through a tragedy, we need to come together. And that was the most important thing. And I think that's a key message to them, that they're not in this journey alone. And you know, the other message I think so many people wonder is, when is it going to get back to normal? And you really have to redefine what normal is, and people don't want to hear that.
So there's the help that people like you can give, that unique experience, reaching out, giving advice, having been there before. What do you think this community needs from the rest of us, whether it's people who live directly in their community or elsewhere in the country? What's the best way to be supported when you've gone through a terrible experience like this? You see all the media cameras show up, your friends have died, you're scared to go back to school, but you've got to continue your education and get back into it at some point.
Right, and I think just reaching out, and I think a phrase, a lot of times people don't understand what to say. And sometimes it's just better to be quiet at a standpoint, just to offer support. Because I know what was a trigger for so many of our people or staff is when people came up and said, "I know what you're feeling." They're saying, "Oh, really? Were you lost in the classroom? Or did your best friend just die?" There would be flowers and tears. And a lot of times when people would walk doors, it constantly reminded them of what. And I think simple things like that. And there were so many people that wanted to be helpful. And originally we put all these signs down the hallways, and students came to me and said, "Mr. D, we appreciate the support of everyone, but it's constantly reminding us what happened." And so I think you got to be aware of, even though you feel you're helping, there's certain things that trigger the emotions of people within your building.
That's Frank DeAngelis, the former principal of Columbine High School and a member of the Principal Recovery Network. Thanks so much for talking to us about this.
Thank you so much.
Philadelphia is getting ready to host the first general election debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and her Republican rival, former President Donald Trump. Reporter Carmen Russell-Luchansky of member station WHYY joins us now from Philadelphia. Hey there.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
Well, I'm good. Let's just start. The debate's going to be held at the National Center. It's hosted a lot of high-profile political events over the years, but it's a busy stretch of town. It's right by the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall, and I'll just add, of course, WHYY. What's it looking like right now?
Well, Scott, I'm literally watching 7 to 8 foot barriers go up along the street from the window here at WHYY as we speak. Starting tomorrow, we expect many of the roads around the center to be closed off, and by Monday, several blocks will be within a heavily fortified perimeter.
Philadelphians, as we know, are not shy about offering their opinion. How do people who live and work in the neighborhood feel about all of this?
Well, you know, I went out and I walked around talking to people earlier, and really no one seems to mind it, and in fact, people seem to think it's kind of appropriate to have the debate here, being that it is like the birthplace of American democracy. For example, this is Eileen Fink.
Because the Constitution was written here, because this is where it all began. And I understand we're very much a swing state. It's a very divided state between Republicans and Democrats. It's a very large state.
Carmen, Pennsylvania's been the center of attention for several elections in a row, but this particular election, it just seems like outsized attention, an incredible amount of attention from candidates this cycle.
So much. You know, just this week, Harris and her running mate Tim Walz were campaigning in Pittsburgh. Donald Trump just had a town hall in Harrisburg. His running mate J.D. Vance has already been several visits, which all really speaks to, like you're saying, how important the state's 19 electoral votes are. But history also tells us the vote's just going to be close, whichever way it goes. Biden won by only 80,000 votes in 2020, and Trump won in 2016 by only 40,000.
Any sense of how the change of the Democratic ticket has affected voters' views on this race?
Yeah, overall, polling shows that there was a shift in support, with Harris doing marginally better than Biden was in a matchup with Trump. But the race also remains extremely close, effectively a tie. And our reporting really bears this out, with there being more excitement around Harris than there was for Biden, especially among younger voters we spoke to. So this is Shiva Sharma, who I met at a recent campaign event.
I am super excited to be voting for the first female president of color, and I feel like this is going to be, like I said, a life-changing moment for young folks just like me.
I'm curious, first of all, if you've been able to find any undecided voters out there, and if so, what they're looking for from this debate in particular.
Yeah, we don't find many undecided voters, but Eileen Fink, who we heard from earlier, is actually one, and she told me she plans to vote, but she's not really excited about it because she believes neither candidate is addressing some really important issues.
I think one of the issues that are not strongly being spoken about is the environment, and not just climate change. There's so many other things about our environment that need help.
I should point out, she did say she might vote for Harris as a vote against Donald Trump.
Got it. Well, let's talk about one big environmental issue in Pennsylvania, and that's fracking. The state is a major natural gas producer because of fracking. Harris used to be fully opposed to it. Now she says she's changed her mind. How is that being received?
Well, when I talk to Republicans, they bring up Democrats' opposition to fracking as a reason to vote for Trump, since they see it as a jobs issue. Now, I want to be clear. Harris's views now seem to coincide with much of the Pennsylvania's Democratic leadership as well. Around,
we're definitely heading in the wrong direction. Prices is booming, so most things need to start to come down. And I believe he's the guy for it.
Mason did say he's going to watch the debate before he made a final decision.
All right, that is Carmen Russell from Chansey and member station WHYY. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
Listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Weekend All Things Considered continues next on WPR News, followed by Snap Judgment at 5. For a full list of our programs and schedule, go to WPR.org/news.
Support for WPR comes from Monk Botanical Gardens in Wausau with Blossom of Life, a walking tour through botanical-inspired visual effects, September 18th to October 26th. More at blossomoflife.org. Support also comes from the Viterbo University Fine Arts Center, presenting singer-songwriter Gavin DeGraw, with guest Caleb Hearn on Saturday, September 14th at Viterbo. Tickets at ViterboFineArtsCenter.com.
This is WPR News.
I'm Dora Fleece Hotel in New York City with these headlines. During a campaign stop in Pittsburgh today, Democratic nominee Kamala Harris said she is honored to have the endorsements of former Vice President Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz, both longtime Republicans. 3 tribal leaders have sent an open letter to both presidential candidates, asking them to prioritize Native issues such as the protection protection of natural resources and tribal lands. And the Centers for Disease Control says a person in Missouri with no known contact with animals has recovered from bird flu after being hospitalized with the illness and given influenza antiviral medications. I'm Dua Khalid Saikal-Tao, NPR News in New York. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Bank of America, offering access to resources and digital tools designed to help local to global companies make moves for their businesses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business. From American Jewish World Service, supporting human rights advocates worldwide in the fight for democracy, equity, and justice for all people. Learn more at ajws.org. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Scott Detrow. It was called the Summer of Racial Reckoning. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, protests erupted. I want to drive into the As tens of thousands took to the streets, some of America's largest corporations joined the call to racial justice.
In Nike's new app, the shoemaker is using its Just Do It brand to say what not to do. Don't turn your back on racism.
Microsoft is joining Amazon and IBM in refusing to sell its facial recognition software to police.
So far, companies have pledged more than $1.7 billion to advance racial justice.
They pledged to take a stand against systemic racism, donated millions to organizations that fight for social justice, promised to support businesses run by women, people of color, and members of the LGBTQ community. And some companies went a step further, extending the social justice narrative, creating programs to incorporate goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring, retaining, and promoting talent.
I have resigned as a member of the Reddit board. I have urged them to fill my seat with a black candidate.
But almost as soon as companies embraced DEI, the landscape of the corporate reckoning began to shift.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs, are under attack by conservative lawmakers. Lowe's scrapping their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs after facing pressure.
This is the latest company to drop diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Technology companies, including Alphabet, the parent company of Google, also Meta Platforms, have made big cuts to those DEI programs. Backlash against DEI gained momentum with the June 2023 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that abolished affirmative action admissions in colleges. While the law only applied to higher learning, it created a legal opening for those who oppose DEI policies in the workplace. I spoke with Harvard Law professor Noah Feldman about this last spring, and he pointed out the affirmative action ruling could stifle companies' ability to consider racial diversity in hiring.
They will no longer tell themselves when they're making a hiring decision, well, if we have two roughly comparable candidates, this candidate adds racial diversity to our workforce, and therefore we should hire that person, because they'll be concerned that the courts will find that to be unlawful discrimination.
Over the past 4 years, many of the companies that so publicly embrace DEI policies have been backing away. What are the policies behind the DEI backlash, and what happens when workplace diversity initiatives are lost? We called up David Glasgow, Executive Director of the Melzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the NY School of Law, and I started by asking him to define DEI as he sees it.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to actually pick apart the three letters in the acronym of DEI because they each mean different things. So the D part, the diversity, is really about diversifying the personnel in a particular institution. So you might focus on hiring, retention. Applicant pool of a local labor pool. The E for equity is really about ensuring basic fairness in the way that your organizational systems and processes operate. So fairness in things like your employee benefits programs or how you hire people, the work assignments that people get.